Mike Murray.
This is SNL.
SNL
By the numbers.
Numbers.
Pete Davidson's back. The writer's strike is over. Season 49. There's the opening haiku for you guys. Welcome to SNL By The Numbers. This is our fourth season doing the show. My name is Mike Murray of the SNN. And this show, we cover stats. Everything you can imagine. Only place in the universe you get up-to-date each week stats on Saturday Night Live. Introduce my first guest, who was there since day one with me. First spin-off show of the SNL Stats days was this show, and Jon was my first guest, of course. So Jon Schneider, welcome back for another season of coverage.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mike Murray. Very excited to be back with you on the show. This is one of my favorite shows because I'm not here every week. I get to listen to it. And like, if I was building an SNL show that I wanted to listen to, it would be you driving that show. So for me, it's so perfect. I love what you do. I love the dedication you have to the numbers and the analytics of SNL. There's nobody like you in our community. So happy to be back with you year after year.
Thank you, Jon. Some might say unicorn status, just some crazy guy in Boston that tracks SNL stats. Could be me, I guess. Who else? And my other guest I'm very excited to bring on the show did one episode with me last year. And funny enough, Travis Kelce was the host of that show. It's Victoria Franso. How are you doing?
I'm excited to be here and talk numbers.
Awesome. And just for any listeners who haven't met you that listen to this show all the time, just could you introduce yourself and tell us what you're all about?
Yeah, I'm all about Saturday Night Live. I live it, I breathe it, I think it, I feel it. It's in my DNA. I never not think about SNL, and that's why I'm here. But also, I live in Chicago, and I do comedy at Second City, and then in January is at IO. And I'm just very passionate about this show and the art form. And I'm just very honored that I'm a part of this spinoff.
That's awesome. Would you describe yourself as a sketchy person? Because Jon got to interview Punky Johnson on this very program just this week, and she said, I'm not a really sketchy person. So Victoria, are you a sketchy person?
Oh, I'm for sure sketchy, but only in one way, and I'll let you guess what way that is.
Have you started performing yet this year?
Me? Yeah. I'm currently in a middle of a show at the Second City in Chicago, doing a lot of sketches and testing out material right now for our big show coming up next month.
And if I were to attend one of your shows, what would I expect? What should I expect?
Chaos and nonsense.
From you?
Specifically me, yeah, but also everyone else too.
All right, awesome.
Mike,
yeah.
Can I tell the listeners why I think that the two of you make such an interesting podcasting pair? I'll just go behind the curtain for a second because
Sure.
as we preview the show and about to get in the numbers, because Mike's brain is so amazing. Like the way he views SNL, the way he sees the numbers. If you're just joining us for the first time this year on the By the Numbers, you're going to see some really incredible stuff and look at the show in the way way differently than we cover on all the other shows. But I also think there's so many people who look at the numbers and they're like, okay, but how does this translate? Like if I was actually on stage, how would I use these numbers to become a better performer on the show? And Victoria right now is taking classes and learning all the steps that you would take basically to become an SNL cast member one day. So because of that, like I think you're dueling perspectives perhaps on what really works on SNL is going to create some fascinating discourse. So I'm just excited to have the two of you here and hopefully have the two of you together for many shows this season.
Thanks for that endorsement. Yeah, I'm excited to have Victoria on for the fall shows.
I'm excited as well. I'll try my best to keep up with the numbers.
That's all we can ask. I'll take care of that half of it. Anyway, so Jon, I mean, we've been talking about this season, I feel like, for a year. I mean, we were chatting in Montreal about it, and what would it look like if a premiere is like after Christmas and that kind of thing. So did it meet your expectations for a premiere in general, and did it have extra emphasis with the manner in which it returned?
Oh, above and beyond met my expectations. Premieres on SNL are not great. Like, the the idea that they can come in and be off this long break and just be running like a well-oiled machine is so far-fetched. Like, these people need time to figure out their clicks and writing partners and inspire ideas and figure out, okay, I have this really good idea, but this isn't the right host for it. So when the right host comes in, then we're going to go with this idea. Like, there's so many factors that come in to putting together a really good SNL week. And what SNL did this week on the show was set themselves up in a perfect way. Like, they really let the cast be the stars of the show this week. And that's all I could have ever wanted from the start to a season, especially for those who we just haven't seen enough of over the last few years as we start to transition into this new cast. So for me, I think the hosting decision was great because, as we talked about on the roundtable on Monday, Pete wasn't really your traditional alumni host. The show wasn't all about Pete Davidson. It was really like, there was the I'm Just Pete, but it wasn't like every sketch was a Pete recurring character. He sort of just blended in as the 18th cast member. And we gave opportunities for some of the performers that we wanted to see try characters, those opportunities. So I really couldn't ask for more from the show. Even if it wasn't your cup of tea, I think that you have to like the effort that they put out in the first week.
Great take. Victoria, just real quick. Coming out of season 48, I feel like our community was saying a lot that like they're clicking, they're like vibing, there's a lot of energy. Do you think they continued that, or did it feel like an ordinary, I shouldn't say ordinary, but like, did it feel like a new chapter, a fresh start? Because usually with the premieres, I feel like we're excited for that. We kind of want to go away with the old and come in with the new. So did you think that that energy or that style continued, or did it feel like, all right, this is a new season, season 49, could be anything, and maybe not like that?
Yeah, no, just to echo John's sentiments, I think for as long of a break as they had, they did a really good job of plugging in the pieces of this puzzle that is SNL. I really enjoyed, I think it was probably easier that Pete was the host because they're familiar with him, his style, and what it's like to work with him, on this show. But they were experimenting, and I think that's going to probably be the theme of season 49, as it should be. We're getting a new audience for the show. We're looking at a younger generation where the world has changed in many ways and is continuing to change. And how is the show going to be evolving with it? And I think this season 49, as approaching season 50 quickly, is going to be an inflection point for them. I'm just excited that they're just doing new things. Even the people they're hiring aren't what they've been known to do historically. It's a lot of stand-ups, and usually it's folks that they pick out from like the Groundlings or Second City or whatever, but they're experimenting with who they hire, and I think they've been making really great choices there. So I'm excited to see what other new things come out of this season.
Yeah, just curious, Victoria, from what you're doing currently, is there like a fast lane from Second City? I mean, it's so famous for producing SNL talent. So with what you're doing right now, is there like a path for people like you or even yourself to audition someday? And how would that work?
Yes. Short answer, yes, there is a path. Usually you take, I'm step A. I'll give some more context because it's easier to explain that way.
Yeah, please.
At the Second City, you can take writing or improv levels A through E, or I think now it's 1 through 5, and they are basic improv and writing classes. Anyone can pay for them, and you go and take them. Then you have to audition for what's called the conservatory. You audition to get into level 1, you have to audition to get into level 3, and then the second part of the conservatory is called grad review, and then you have to audition to get into the grad review. Once you've completed that, if you've made all the way through, you get to audition for what's called the generals at the Second City, and that's where a lot of those SNL folks come from, or folks who's made it past there and been cast in the main stage shows or touring, what's called touring company. And that's where Second City goes across the country to do shows. And then if you make a well enough impression, you kind of get plucked and, get to put in an audition for the show. So I graduated. My last class was on the 12. Now we're just finishing up our shows. Thank you. And we'll see what happens when the generals happen, how auditions go. I'm going to try. I'm also very aware that there are a lot of people wanting to do the same thing. So won't get my hopes too high, but I mean, I think I've done a solid job. So, but yeah, that in a nutshell is how the path is. Not
We're,
guaranteed, but there are opportunities.
well, we're all supporting you and pulling for you to
Thank you.
follow your dreams. Last quick question. Do you have a favorite SNL alumnus from the Second City?
Chris Farley.
All right.
Chris Farley.
Good answer. All right. So to keep with our theme, on this show, we do, stats every week, of course, but there's a stat that is original to this show, which is about combining screen time, appearances, weighting those appearances and recurring characters, and basically everything you could quantize about the show into one stat. So last season, it was, interrupted by the strike, but after the Ana de Armas and ended up being the finale, we did a final by the numbers show, John, myself, and our friend Bill, and we talked about every cast member and what they did that season. And looking forward, I want to just look at last year's power rankings, because I want to see, it's too early right now to do this stat for this season because there's only one episode of data. So we're going to save that for later on when we have a bigger average to look at, because this stat right here averages everything over the season. So we see them move up and down. So we've been calling it the power ranking. So John, when you see last year's numbers you're very familiar with, I want to ask you, do you see this power ranking as it was last year being almost the same at the end of this season, or do you see potential for a lot of movement? And if so, what movement would you want to see or expect to see?
Interesting question. I mean, I think that we have a big clump of rookies from 13 to 16. I think that I would expect them to be jumbled up now more with the regular players, or the repertory players. So for me, I think Marcelo is the one that, as I mentioned, if I was going to go to Vegas and bet on their numbers for the year, I think he's the one that's going to be really, really integrated well into the repertory players. So I can't imagine him finishing as low as we did. I think Longfellow, Devin, Molly, I think they're all still trying to find their place on the show a little bit. So for me, it'll be interesting to see where they end up. Andrew Dismukes, I mean, he had a really, really strong showing in this first episode. So for me, he's a big X factor. Where will he end up in his fourth season on the show? We did hear from Punky as well, who happens to be at the bottom of this list. But, Punky had mentioned, and this was, if you haven't checked out the Punky Johnson interview, I just loved getting to talk to her. She's one of my favorite cast members ever, just in terms of like personality, one of the nicest people ever to be on the show, and so much fun. But she just mentioned one of the great tidbits from that interview was that when they got to NBC and they sat down with Lorne Michaels for season 49, he said, forget everything you know about all the people that you like to work with. Go ahead and work with some new people, shuffle the deck, and try new things, because you never know what type of characters or sketches that you're going to come up with new writers. And that, to me, I think would be the biggest indication that could potentially lead to some shuffling of these placements on the list.
Awesome. And yeah, I listened to the interview today, John. It was awesome. That was probably my favorite part about it. That was like such a cool thing to know. And just shows that Lorne is still thinking about this type of stuff. He's not asleep at the wheel. He's really considering the talent that he has in his building and the writers on his staff, and saying, hey, I want good shit on the show. So however that works is up to you guys. But at the same time, maybe more of the same isn't what I want. And being in a comfort zone all the time might not make the best content and create the best product that could come from this talent. And so just as a reminder of last year's ranking, so ending season 48, this is an average of every piece of data that I have from that cast. This is where it all shook out. It was top 10 was Keenan, Bowen, Heidi, Mikey, Jost, Chloe, JJ, Ego, Che, and Sarah Sherman. So they were the top 10 of the cast. And then the bottom 7 was Andrew Dismukes, Cecily, who was only in 5.5 episodes of the show last year, but still her screen time was so huge. Appearances, leading every sketch, recurring characters, saying live from New York, all that type of stuff. So again, that's Andrew, Cecily, followed by Marcelo, Longfellow, Devin, Molly, and Punky. So that was last year's ranking. So Victoria, when you watched just this one episode, we have a tiny sample size, so much to come, but do you see it kind of being status quo, or do you have someone in the middle that's going to the top, or someone at the bottom going to the middle?
It's funny that Punky Johnson was the interview today, which I haven't watched yet, unfortunately, but I will, I promise. I've been saying for a long time, I want more Punky Johnson. Punky is, in my opinion, incredibly underused and underrated on the show. She brings such a unique perspective, and she's incredibly funny. I want to see more of her. And unfortunately, this ranking indicates that there is simply not enough of her. And I think starting season 49 with a low amount of Punky, or as Daryl Hammond said, Clinky Johnson in the intros, it's disappointing. I would love to see more of her shoot to the top. I think the rest of the bottom of this list, they're new folks, so that's understandable. And then Kenan Thompson being the anchor that he is of the show, having the most, is also not surprising. But my prediction, my hope is more Punky Johnson.
This is a pro Punky program.
Absolutely.
So working on my plosives on the microphone right there. Pro Punky program. Okay. So John, do you see any vet slipping down the ranks? I mean, we've talked about how we're gearing up for 50. We got a lot of strong vets, and now we have this new class from last year. We have one newbie this year. So is anyone going to take a back seat to let people climb the rankings? I mean, again, this is a ranking based on, each other. So even if you score really high, if a veteran's above scoring even higher, that doesn't mean you're doing badly. It just means that someone else is just like dominating the show more than you are at that given episode. So John, do you see anyone slipping down a little bit to allow some room for growth?
I wish I had a good answer here. I mean, I want to be honest with our listeners that I think that this is going to be the most interesting question to answer in season 49, which is which veteran does take a step back, because we will get things shuffled on the list here. Like, I think that there's going to be some featured players that are going to rise and then will cause some longtime cast members to fall. But I don't know who yet. I think that it's going to be very fascinating to watch. So I hope that answer is satisfactory, Mike, because I really don't know.
It's a tough one. I mean, like, I always compare this show because it's week by week and we wait the entire week for it, and then it arrives and we get to enjoy it at the time. And then the next day or the next week, we get to analyze the film. So I always think it's like the NFL in that way. In week one, you don't know what you're going to get. Good teams can look bad to start and look great later, and vice versa. So let's take a look at this episode.
Well, I was also going to say, just to comment on Lauren saying, forget what you know and team up with some new folks. That is really smart. It tends to get cliquey once you get to know. I mean, even at Second City, even though I'm just a student, but it tends to get cliquey, and sometimes you have to be forced to do that. And when that happens, really good things happen. So I'm appreciative of Lauren doing that. I also got to speak to a former cast member. I will not name names because of the details given to me, but they mentioned that it was really hard to get time on air because of the clicks, and you have to know certain people and you have to kind of fight your way through it. And it's just more about who you know and how you can finagle your way through. So I think Lauren doing that's going to make a difference and even impact longevity of castmates staying on the show longer.
What era of the cast were they in, Victoria?
A couple seasons ago.
Okay.
A couple seasons ago.
All right.
Does her name rhyme with Schmaristotle?
Let's move on. Okay. Victoria. So, welcome to season 49, SNL By The Numbers. We have this season's first episode, screen time. We had a lot of people in this episode. Will you take it away and let the good listeners know what the screen time was for each individual who appeared in this episode?
Yes. Pete Davidson at the most time here with 26 minutes and 40 seconds, more than he's done in the last 5 years of SNL combined. That's a joke, maybe. I don't know. Followed by Kenan Thompson, surprise, surprise, at 10 minutes and 18 seconds, with Bowen Yang at 9 minutes and 12 seconds, which I'm glad because we got some character work out of him, which I really loved and enjoyed. Colin Jost at 6 minutes and 53 seconds. Fun fact about Colin Jost: my mom says she wishes I would marry him. Followed by Andrew Dismukes at 6 minutes and 5 seconds. Heidi Gardner at 4 minutes and 57 seconds. Michael Che at 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Question about that, just to break things up. Do we think Colin Jost and Michael Che, since they only appear at Weekend Update, is that minute and some change because of that joke swap situation?
Well,
Is that
it's taken 20 minutes and 36 seconds into the season, John. We have our most asked question of By the Numbers. Why do Michael Che and Colin Jost get different screen time? And the
Yes.
answer is we don't know. We don't make the show. But from a stat, perspective of me measuring the screen time, a lot of times it's that Colin will, on average, get more guests. In this specific episode, they had one each. Che with Bowen and Jost with Keenan. But normally it's just like that. Colin always leads off the jokes and he gets a few in. And then after that, they kind of have like the back and forth volley of jokes for the rest of Update. And I've said this many times in this show, but this is like a thing they do on Update all the time that I think just because it works and the audience loves it is they'll have Che deliver a punchline and then immediately cut to Jost just to see his like squirm reaction to the joke. And, sometimes Che will laugh. And so Colin has to kind of recover from Che's punchline before he gets into his next joke delivery. So that's really my answer from doing this. And by the way, personal note, this was my 100th SNL episode that I've analyzed statistically.
Yay.
Wow. Congrats, Mike. That's amazing.
And next week is episode 950. So you can do the math. You see how many I have left. A lot. But yeah, that's the answer, Victoria. It's some episodes Che does have more screen time, but generally Colin Jost gets like 30% more screen time than him.
Well, maybe Michael Che's right about him. Anyway, our musical performer, Ice Spice, is in at 4 minutes and 43 seconds, followed by Mikey Day at 4 minutes and 6 seconds. Newbie, not Newbie, but Newish B, Devin Walker at 2 minutes and 56 seconds. Our beloved Marcelo Hernandez is at 2 minutes and 49 seconds, followed by Chloe Feynman at 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Sarah Sherman with her glamgina at 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And then a sad 2 minutes and 24 seconds for Ego. Was really hoping for more of my girl on this show, but I'll take what I can get at this point. And then musical performer guest, Rima, I believe is how you pronounce it, at 2 minutes and 4 seconds. And then we're jumping into the ones with Michael Longfellow at 1 minute and 50 seconds, James Austin Johnson, or I call him Shrimp Zhaj, at 1 minute and 28 seconds. Newbie Chloe Trost coming at 1 minute and 10 seconds. Really impressive. Then we have Please Don't Destroy Crew with Ben Marshall at 38 seconds, John Higgins at 36 seconds. Not PDD is Molly Kearney at 33, Punky Johnson at 32. See, I need more than 32 seconds of Punky, nonetheless. I always have trouble with his last name.
Herlihy.
Herlihy.
Yeah.
Herlihy. Okay. Herlihy at 28 seconds. And then really, truly the stars of the show, young Ben Marshall at 26 seconds, young JD Higgins at 24 seconds, and then Big Mart at 21 seconds, with JD's dad, Steve Higgins, at 11, Ben Silva at 11, August White at 11, John Mulaney, 10 seconds. Personally, think it should have been 15, but who am I? And then the real stars that I think should have had the most screen time, Michael Che's mom at 6 seconds, Travis Kelce, and Taylor Swift at 6 seconds. But when your biggest star is Michael Che's mom, you don't need more than 6 seconds to make an impression. So, and that's
the stat read right there. Victoria
that is
debut.
the stat read.
All right, John, first stats of the season we're looking at. What's the big takeaway? If this were a hot take show at 1:10 a.m. Eastern and you were looking at the stats and I had somehow could do this all in 10 minutes, what would be your headline or your hot take of?
Ooh, okay. Well, I do want to just say before I get into that, and I will answer your question, I promise, Mike, but I just want to say for all the listeners who may be just checking this out for the first time and being like, screen time, okay, interesting. Why does that matter? Well, I just want to explain to you why it does. Because in our opinion here, what the screen time makes a major difference when it comes to the next step post SNL career. Like Victoria, like right now, she is in the process or in the stage that's like the double A or single A or whatever it is when you're starting to like rise up the ranks. And then if SNL is like the triple A of comedy, movies and TV shows become, what happens when you reach the majors and you leave SNL and you go into the entertainment world. And having a lot of screen time means that agents and managers and like everyone is seeing you on screen and wants to book you for stuff and will ultimately lead to a strong SNL career off the show. So there are other factors naturally, but this is a big one. And it also helps with name recognition, social media following, all of this stuff. So, some of you may be watching the show and thinking, okay, it's a sketch comedy show. I want to look at things sketch by sketch and evaluate it. That's totally fine. But I can promise you that people who are at the show who have career goals are thinking about some of these analytics as they start to think about the next stages of their career. So just wanted to give that perspective. But to answer your question, Mike, I think that there are some really interesting things here in that. Well, first I'll say Chloe Fineman, Ego Odom, Sarah Sherman. This was not a strong episode analytically for the women of the show. They were all down towards the 2-minute range. They were not. There was no woman in the cast who was in the top 5 this week. So we sometimes discuss on the show, like, does a male host or a female host make a difference for stuff like that? And I think ultimately, Mike, we come to the conclusion that it's sort of negligent at a certain point. But this was not a show that was driven by the women analytically, even though we had Heidi Gardner have a really strong sketch and we had Sarah Sherman who had a really strong sketch. So what's interesting here is we talk about quality versus quantity. Quantity was not there for the women of the show this week, but did the quality of their work rise up? And I think that would be my headline coming out of here, looking at who maybe didn't rise to the occasion in episode number 1.
Yeah, well said. First of all, just you were kind of reminding me about the importance of the screen time. And, this is the first episode of the season, so I'll remind people about, what we're all about is that, like, I try not to measure it's kind of hard to quantize comedy, but we're doing it in a way that of what we see and what is tangible, like all those things that are on the screen that we possibly can measure. And I get asked a lot of times when we do the end of the year, we will do stats for the whole season on our social media pages. And I get comments like that it's done by a computer. And although I'm very flattered, it's not done by a computer. It's done by a living, breathing person. And the way I do it is if you're on screen, like your face is on screen, if you're ever speaking, that's screen time. So if half of your face is on screen, that counts. If it's just like your elbow and I can't see you, it does not count. But if you're speaking and the camera's on you, including voiceovers, which, we always count too, that's what I consider screen time. So I have 100 episodes of this screen time for using those parameters. So Victoria, I would like to ask you, was there a certain performance in this show that really impressed you before we move on?
Yeah, but before I answer that, I also want to add to the importance of these numbers. So I'm in a process. I'm putting up a show that I would call SNL-esque. It's on stage, so it's not an actual set, but we're looking at run times and we're looking at impact of performance and how long it goes. Is it shorter? So in looking at sketches and performing for the future, not that they're necessarily looking to our stats, but you never know. They watch. They take those times into consideration. Like a sketch like this maybe ran 30 seconds too long. How do we tweak it in the future to make it better? So on and so forth. So run times are important and screen time is also important. I think it also helps to, for them at least, even out the playing field as much as possible. Nonetheless, performance, besides Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, I'm going to say I really enjoyed, oh man, I'm Just Pete. I really love that. I think that was probably my favorite, thinking now that I reflect a little bit longer on it, it's probably I'm Just Pete. But that's just because I'm a Barbie girl.
I love that pre-tape. I think anyone who has like negative things to say about Pete's time on the show, maybe they didn't like his style or something on the live sketches, but let's just be real. His pre-tape work was incredible. Like it's some of the best SNL of the past decade, I think, has occurred in those pre-tapes, and he brings it for those. I mean, I was watching some of the behind the scenes, like on Instagram, the editors and the producers of those, and seeing Pete like on the set doing that. I'm like, this guy probably is so easy to work with because he brings it every take. So sometimes people in SNL, it's a live show, but their strengths are really in those. And I think Pete's a great example because he was phenomenal in that pre-tape. I loved that. I had no idea it was a Barbie parody until the very end when Chloe Fineman was playing Barbie. And I was like, okay, it makes sense why everything's like pink and Barbie looking now. So I had to go and find that clip of the movie to watch it to maybe understand how beautifully done the like shot by shot nature of it was. And of course the music.
You haven't seen Barbie?
No, I have not. Is it good?
Incredible.
Yeah,
Whoa.
I've been told it's really good. Yeah.
Mike, can I jump in with a couple things?
Yeah, please.
A couple other tidbits about the screen time here. So first, I just want to mention something. I love this comment from our friend Ellis in the chat, who mentions that 2 sketches that were prominently featured, or that prominently featured Pete and some of the women in the cast, were cut after dress, including the Golden Bachelor and DiCaprio's Island. So we mentioned those on the Hot Take Show. We typically, like whenever we get the opportunity, we'll mention a couple of dress sketches that were cut. And that's always interesting, right? To think about, okay, these were moments or creations by the show that came so close to getting on air, but for one reason or another were cut, and ultimately would change how we would view the entire show, especially on a show like this on By the Numbers. So it is interesting to talk about that stuff, but I want to reiterate to the audience is that like what makes it on screen is, final. That's there. That's going to live forever. The idea of, whoever the 200 something people that attended dress and anyone who reads up on the dress sketches is interesting. But, 5 years from now, it becomes, it doesn't take, but this stuff will always be looked back on. So that's why that stuff's important. So I just want to mention that. And I also want to say, if I had to look at this screen time, and maybe this is something that I would notice just because I do this every week and look at it, Pete Davidson screen time, I was like, oh, that's a lot of screen time. And Mike, I went and I looked at our host stats from last year.
Yeah.
Pete Davidson would have been the second, I think, right behind Miles Teller for the most screen time for a host if this was last season. So like he really was just crushing it this episode.
Yeah, that was my big takeaway. Of course, bringing in an alum, you're thinking that they're going to be on screen a lot. But I looked back, and as I mentioned earlier, this is my 100th episode doing this. He was the 5th highest screen time of any host of the last 100 episodes. I only caveat is that I took out double duty musical performances, so he would be behind like a Billie Eilish or somebody like that. But if you take those out and just do their hosting duties, then Pete's 5th. So that's the unbreakable record is Sudeikis, so he's number 1, but followed by Mulaney in 47, Adam Sandler, Miles Teller, who John just mentioned, who hosted last year's premiere, and then Pete. So at 26 minutes, 40 seconds, that was Pete's total. And I saw someone in the chat mention that, how much compared to his last season. I just ran the math real quick on air, and that would have been 63% of his time in his final season as a cast member. So if you look back at season 47 and added up all the Pete time, which I've done, then you take this number and say that's, over half of his time as of, in his final season was represented on last Saturday.
And remember, Taylor Swift vultured 6 seconds from him when she introduced Ice Spice.
Vultured.
That's true.
I made the joke that was more than his entire last couple of years. So
you weren't that far
impressed.
off, Victoria. You weren't. So that's more than other alum like Maya Rudolph. Like people have Will Forte. So in the last 100 episodes, there's been other alum, Kristen Wiig, a couple times. So that's saying a lot because you think about Pete coming in as Punky and Andrew joked in that pre-tape. He only has one character. We didn't even see that character. Didn't see him on Update where we're used to seeing him because he did do a stand-up monologue. It probably felt redundant to do so. So I was impressed by that. And yeah, this screen time is as fun as it is for me to do and to put out. It is something that the cast does look at. So again, won't name any names like Victoria earlier, but it's something that they're invested in. And if they're invested in it, then I'm more invested in it because it is fun to see every week. And I've been asked more than a couple times, oh, do you think that cast would use that data for like arbitration to get like contracts? And I was like, well, first of all, I don't really want to be subpoenaed by NBC. I mean, if they do, I'll bring my workbooks with me. But it's not really, like I mentioned, always what is funny, but it does say a lot if your sketches keep making air. Like Jon said, you can be so close. The set has been designed. It was even at dress in front of a live audience, but it's not in the final cut of the episode. We'll look back, like Jon said, and it's not in there. So if we're lucky, we see it on YouTube, the next couple days. So like Victoria mentioned, 6 seconds a piece were 2 surprise cameos. And another thing about me is for the last 15 years I've had like 3 passions, and I know Jon can vouch for me on this, and it's...
Can I guess what they are?
Oh, please. I'd love for you to guess what they are.
Okay, so SNL, Tom Brady, and Taylor Swift.
Well, you were right, as in Tom Brady, as in the NFL, because I'm obsessed with the NFL, Taylor Swift, and SNL. So it seemed like NBC was like my explore page or my For You page. And I know that those are all really big things, but I had people reach out to me, be like, how do you feel? Like all the things that you love are together at once. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like really confused and kind of scared. I don't know. So I decided to do, I'm wearing an Eras hoodie right now. So I feel like kind of like Mikey Day in that sketch. So I was thinking not only were Taylor and Travis both appearing for 6 seconds apiece, but there were a lot of Swift references in the show, not only in the NFL sketch. So I did tally those this morning and counted how many times did they say Taylor terms, like her name, Taylor or Swift. So I'll read this out for you right now. They said Taylor 9 times, Swift 9 times, Kelce 3 times, a couple of Taylor's exes, Joe 3 times, and Maddie Healy even once. A couple Taylor songs. A Taylor song was mentioned by name 9 times. Which were Karma twice, Bad Blood twice, This Love twice, Delicate once, Love Story sung by Pete once, and Forever and Always. And then the Eras tour or movie were mentioned twice. So that's, a lot in the NFL sketch, but also PDD. They were all wearing Taylor merch, much like myself. And then even Christopher Columbus on Weekend Update, played by Bowen Yang, mentioned Boy Genius, who opened for Taylor. So Victoria, what do you make of the Taylor mania taking to the Studio 8H?
I'm so impressed by you. Well, already because you're really good with numbers, and I went to the College of Communication, so I wouldn't have to deal with numbers. But that aside, that's very Swifty behavior because she loves to leave Easter eggs and a lot of things.
She's
for
a
people to
mastermind.
find. She is. I feel like I'm going to become a Swiftie very soon. We'll talk about it. But nonetheless, I don't know if it was planned or not. Maybe.
None of it was accidental, Victoria.
Get on the bus, Victoria.
Pull up.
Don't get left behind.
No, but yeah, she leaves Easter eggs. I think it's clever. It was also the premiere of her movie, which I did see earlier that day. I took my mother, who is a Swiftie. I made her friendship bracelets, and I was incredibly impressed by the movie. So even if you're not a Taylor Swift fan, you should go see it. It's really a wonderful performance and nicely put together. Nonetheless, I think it just fits into the Taylor era that is Telce or whatever they're called.
Jon, I mean, I know it was discussed a little bit, of course, on the 2 shows you've already done this week about this episode, but I want to take a step back from that and ask, what does this mean for the show? Is it kind of like just a fun little surprise and distraction from the content, or is it very intentional and, like, I would say SNL wants to do more of this? Because I think you talked about with your panel, Victoria, you were there, saying that they're bringing the younger people to the show, and not every Swiftie is young, case in point right here. But is this something that they should do more of? Is this kind of an eye roll to the SNL diehards that we communicate with? And just what do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, like, I always look at SNL as being very of the moment. I think one of the one of the purposes of the podcast when we first started it a few years back was thinking about how an episode would be viewed 10 or 20 years down the road. And we are living in a time right now in October of 2023 where Taylor Swift is the biggest celebrity in the world. And, everyone, either has heard of her concerts or music or is one of the people who is just absolutely obsessed with it. And, because of that, I think it would be a disservice of SNL to the listenership and the viewership to not address it in some way. But instead of just addressing it, they actually involved Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce and discussions of them in their content this week. So for me, I enjoy when SNL is of the moment. Yes, we can still have throughout the 90 minutes slice of life sketches and cast members trying characters and going into these crazy and weird worlds that they design. But we still have to remember that, discussing what's happening in the world today is such an important part of Saturday Night Live and what makes it so beautiful to look back on episodes from the 70s and 80s and 90s and really feel like you're living in that time. Mike, you're just on mute. Just make sure you just we can hear you.
They'll do it for like a Marvel movie, bring people out, like things that are in the zeitgeist at that time, get people excited. But it's just funny that in this case, the two people most talked about, NFL season full swing, Era's movie out, this like new item that everyone wants to talk about, and they're like friends of the show. So it's kind of perfect marriage for NBC, who broadcasts football, and SNL to have Taylor on. Travis Kelce hosted the show 5 episodes ago. If you go back to last season, and Taylor was a musical guest in season 47 with the Jonathan Majors episode and did the longest single performance in the history of the show. And she's hosted before, done double duty. So it all makes sense, but I know that we have a lot of passionate listeners who might kind of like passionate football fans who might not be too keen on this whole thing and think that it's all just for money or attention, but that's what SNL wants. They want eyeballs on the screen. So nothing wrong with it from me. But it was funny because, and John, maybe you have some knowledge of this. Were they already producing that NFL sketch before they knew she's going to be there? Because I'm curious, because they were obviously joking about her, not in a mean way, and then later on, like in the same sketch, her current boyfriend shows up. So it was a little funny seeing it that way.
Yes, they were. And Variety, I think it was, just want to make sure I get the publication right, posted an article with some information about how it all came together, which was very last minute. They knew that Taylor and Kelce were in New York. They weren't sure if they were going to come or not, and ultimately they ended up coming. But they were not there for dress rehearsal, which was the same sketch, but with a different button at the end. So it wasn't a cut to Travis Kelce, and that's how we're going to end the sketch. In fact, our friends who attended dress rehearsal told us it ended a little bit more awkwardly. So I think that the sketch was elevated by the fact that Travis Kelce was there to put a stamp on it and really like give it that good ending.
Yeah, it makes sense that they would mention it regardless. Victoria, any last thoughts on this?
So many things are coming together. First, someone in the chat said, it was also surreal to me to see Kanye reference in the Pete piece the same night Taylor was there. Interesting. Another Easter egg, potentially. And the fact that they're in New York as she's about to release 1989 Taylor's version, and then she comes to SNL, and then they hard launch their relationship. There's so much going on. I cannot keep up.
Welcome to New York.
Oh, exhausted.
I got that.
Yeah.
Exhausted.
I can go all night or all season, whatever. So that brings me to
Forever
my next segment. Forever and always. Secret song, Philadelphia Night 2. Okay, so I did something different this episode. So I'm known for screen time, for appearances, for all those metrics we see. It's like, what if I take a different route and look at what we hear? So for the first time, I popped in the audio for the episode and I did some analysis on the audio, because I'm thinking, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not the arbiter of comedy and what's funny to you, because it's so subjective. But what if I can quantize that? I'll never stop. You can't stop me doing this. So I looked at the peaks in the audio for applause and laughter. So Victoria, you want to start? What do you think was the biggest applause of the episode by the analysis of the sound waves of the episode.
Travis Kelce.
You got
Travis
it.
Kelce
Number
appeared.
one was the
Yeah.
biggest.
Even more
John?
than Taylor introducing Rima.
It
Or
was
Rima and Ice Spice.
right. It was a
My-
little bigger than that.
My guess is they probably exhausted that when she came onto the stage, when she came out before
Agreed.
the camera panned to her.
Yeah. So if you're ever there in person, basically like you can see the person who comes out, and usually they're like
Mhm.
waving to the audience and stuff like that. The way that she was standing, like the angle where she was left of the musical guest, right? Like
Yes.
the way we
Like
were facing
stage
her.
right. Yeah. So if you're looking at
Mhm.
the stage
Exactly.
to the left in front of the camera.
So so you would see her if you're in the balcony, but if you're on the like if you're in front of home base and your chair like swivels, you would basically probably like see a person there. I don't know like how many people would be blocking your view if it was like obstructed or not, but you may not exactly, if you're like on the first floor, be able, or the eighth floor, be able to tell who that is, but definitely people in the balcony I think would have seen her when she walked out.
Right. And, she needed to give Ice Spice her moment. So the crowd's got to quiet down for that. And then, normal applause for any musical guest would follow that. John, do you want to guess maybe the biggest laugh of the night?
Biggest laugh of the night. Was it, okay, let me see. Could it have possibly been Keenan saying this?
Do it work on booty holes.
It was not, but Keenan was up there. The biggest laugh of the night. What, Victoria, do you want to
tell me
weigh
which
in?
sketch it was from?
It was on Update.
It was okay. It was this one.
Why? It's the first show.
Yeah, it was that one. Yep.
It was that one. Yeah.
And this it's just funny. We did a preseason roundtable, John, myself, and Darren from SNL Nerds, and his wish was, to get the joke swap back, and they gave us a little taste of it this week, surprising Colin, making him uncomfortable, and that was the biggest like isolated laugh. Because of course, going through the audio, like you have like SNL Band and the intro, like that are all peaking on the sound, but that was the biggest one. And so the other cheers were Taylor number 2, and number 3 was Bowen being introduced on Update. So people were very excited to see Bowen swivel in next to Shay there. A second laugh was Pete revealing his first Google search in the Wired sketch. So when they did the reveal that his character was supposed to be the diarrhea culprit, that's a new one on this podcast, of the Delta flight, that was a huge laugh. And then Keenan, the one I mentioned, John, is when he followed up, and you mentioned this on the Monday night roundtable, when he kind of like improved and saying, I like that
Here,
black
I'll
dad
play that,
joke.
Mike.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Like that black dad joke.
Right, big laugh right there. So that was fun to see. So little new stat for the week, because it is fun to maybe measure comedy in that way, because it's actual people reacting to things in real time. Victoria, you're giving us a laugh right now on mute, but
I'm thinking about if you watched the Hot Take show, we talked about the Wired sketch and how diarrhea makes me laugh because I'm a toddler. And so
But you're not even laughing. The thing is, you're not even laughing about that. You're laughing about that.
Go watch that. I mean, I was so out of pocket that Hot Takes. Like I haven't been that unfiltered in a while.
We
But
love
I was like diarrhea up and down a plane is so funny to me. Would have hated to be there. Anyway, I'm not gonna derail, but I had to think about it.
a lot of people did not make it to Barcelona, Victoria. Just so you know,
Hey.
it's very serious.
Mike, you're going to be on with Victoria a lot in the fall, so you have to not only produce the stats, but also the scats for Victoria.
Ooh, okay. Here on SNL Scats.
Yeah, exactly.
Diarrhea culprit. Okay. It's like basically tied for that last one, John. I mentioned when you said Keenan with the clamgina booty hole punchline at the end. That's a new one too. Is when Colin Joe said he knew what an HBCU was, and Keenan's reaction to that when he said it's like good for you or something, or
Yeah.
that
Oh, wait,
was.
actually,
Do you have that one?
I think I do have that one. Yeah, I pulled that one as well.
Oh, awesome.
Very good, Colin.
Right. So I thought that was pretty fun. All right. So last segment of the night. This is always special when we have a premiere, and I'm always just super excited for people having their first episode on SNL because much like debuting on a sports team, it's very much like that because you only get one shot. So does it always mean that you're going to not have a great career or have an awesome career in SNL? Of course not. But this is our only chance to ever acknowledge Chloe Trost's entry into the SNL family. So I looked at the debuts of a lot of people who are familiar with in the cast right now and some people who did not make it past their first season. But Victoria, would you be down to read the screen time from everyone's debuts?
Yes, now that I've collected myself. All right, starting with Shrimp Zhaj, also known as James Austin Johnson, with a whopping 10 minutes and 15 seconds. And I remember his debut when he came out as Joe Biden. I was like, whoa, like this is incredible to see the new guy first on screen. But followed by the one and only Sarah Sherman with 4 minutes and 51 seconds. Michael Longfellow, not too long though, at 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Our girl Ego Nwodim at 2 minutes and 32 seconds. The latest newbie, Chloe Trost, at 1 minute and 10 seconds. And then everyone else from here on out falls below the minute mark at Lauren Holt with 57 seconds, Bowen Yang with 49, Punky Johnson with 43, which unfortunately seems to be more than her current numbers, but we'll talk about that. Aristotle Atari at 38 seconds, Chloe Feynman and Devin Walker with 29 seconds, Molly Kearney, 19 seconds, Marcelo Hernandez, 15 seconds, and then last but definitely not least, Andrew Dismukes at 13 seconds.
Thank you. I mean, it's funny because we can now have context with these where when we started in season 46, it was a really weird time coming back from COVID and we had like the longest cold open of the last 100 episodes, whereas the Jim Carrey, Alec Baldwin debate. And so that took up a lot of time. Huge cast of 21 people. And we had Kate, Cecily, 80, Pete, Alex, Beck, Kyle, like all these big names. So Aristotle, Punky, and Lauren were coming in at a weird time. But, see Andrew Smukes, 13 seconds. His first episode, he appeared in the Drew Barrymore pre-tape as like an unspeaking role as the cameraman. And then he was the Buffalo Wild Wings delivery guy to Punky when Punky got her first live appearance in that episode. So all these stats Victoria just read are in their respective debut seasons. So season 44 till now with Chloe. So John, what did you see from Chloe? So it's just a small sample, but did you see anything that might, tip your opinion that what kind of performer she might be in the season?
No, not necessarily. I don't think that there was any like featured moments. Like JAJ and Sarah, I think had some of the greater debuts in SNL history, especially JAJ. Like Mike, once we have all of the screen time data from the history of the show, I think it'd be fascinating to see where JAJ's like historical debut stacks up. I do think that Chloe had a very solid episode. So basically we had 4 appearances, which is at the top of the list here, tied with JAJ and Bowen Yang for of the last, with 4 appearances tied of the last few seasons, like really just near the top. But basically, and by the way, we should say what those are in case not everybody knows, which is that she did a voiceover in the Wired autocomplete sketch. So just a very brief one there. She very briefly appeared as a doctor in I'm Just Pete. We obviously saw her on Beach Day as well, and then in the Glam Gina sketch. So I think the Glam Gina sketch, her appearance where Pete is opening up the door and then she is there and basically, has a great line to Pete Davidson. I think that was the standout moment, but I think she was just sort of just getting her footing going and there wasn't a featured moment here for Chloe Trost. I would, however, recommend that for anybody who's interested in some extra content, heading over to the SNL YouTube channel tonight because there is a Q&A that they just put out with Chloe Trost. It's about 2 minutes. She answers a bunch of rapid fire questions and talks about how she auditioned last year for Saturday Night Live, almost got cast on season 48, and showed some audition footage as well, which is always really exciting when we get to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to check that out. But there's definitely more pressure, I would say, when you start off really hot. So like Michael Longfellow was definitely the talk of our community after the first episode last year. I mean, there was some good moments with the Be Real sketch and things like that, but I feel like it was in the Manning Cast cold open was talked about a lot. But Michael Longfellow, much like Pete Davidson or Cecily or Kyle Mooney, was on Update his first episode. So I would have been surprised to see any of the sophomores or the one rookie this year on Update. That would have surprised me. But seeing Michael Longfellow last year was like a really nice surprise. And then we got Marcelo and Devin right after. So I'm not sure if Chloe Trost is really fighting for an Update spot early on because those were stand-ups and she's more of a sketch performer. But when we do see Chloe lead a sketch, I think it'll be really exciting. So Victoria, any thoughts on our new rookie this year, much like Ego coming in solo?
Yeah, again, it's what John said. It's hard to see what type of performer she'll be. I haven't seen anything of hers previously to compare it to, but nonetheless, I'm still excited for her and happy for her. I know she's a buddy of PDD, so has to be extremely talented. So can't wait for what's to come.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see her in some PDD shorts. And by the way, talking about the audio, the laughs from the Apollo were huge for the original Princes of Comedy. So that was funny to see the audio. I'm like, oh, these laughs are huge. I'm like, oh, they're from the Def Jam Comedy, of course. All right, so that's going to be about it. But it was fun to see a new debut, of course. And I also, if you want to look along on YouTube after this is wrapped up, I also put how many appearances and what their screen time per appearance was. So I did that to kind of show if they had a lead or not, because if you had one really big lead like JJ in the cold open, Sarah Sherman and her debut having the mail-in testing sketch in the 10-1, like I said, Michael Longfellow on Update in his debut kind of just shed some light on that with that stat at the end there. So we are looking forward to next week. Like I said, episode 950. John, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, so we have a lot to talk about when it comes to Bad Bunny coming in to host this week. But before we just wrap up our discussion on the premiere, I do have a couple things I want to update the listeners on. If you don't mind,
please.
Mike. Okay, first off, we had our draft last week, which was a really fun podcast where we had 8 people on with us. And we do this every season where we draft the cast members and you win based on your total team appearances. So everyone got 2 or max 3 players on their cast if you drafted Joseph and Che as a duo. So I want to bring up on screen the updated standings right now of the first week of draft. Here we go. And that would be on screen right now. Yeah, draft standings after week 1. So Sammy is in the lead, just for anyone following along, has the team of Keenan and Chloe Trost, who had 9 appearances combined. Team Amanda, what a get here with having Bowen and the combination of Jost and Che, who both were in 2 sketches. That was amazing. Then we had Haskell with Chloe and Marcelo, 7 sketches. Bill, Mikey, and Devin at 6, tied with Thomas, who had Ego and his Meeks at 6 sketches. I was in 6th place with JJ and Punky, who put together 5 sketches for this episode. And then we have TJ and Zoe tied for 7th with Sarah and Longfellow for TJ at 4 points. Zoe has Heidi and Molly at 4 points. So those are the draft standings after week 1. Mike, is there any draft team that you really like?
Anything that has Keenan on it, I think will win. That's my take.
Yeah. So Sammy had Keenan last year and didn't win. So it will be interesting. Last year, Rebecca won with the team of Sarah and Chloe.
Right. That's a good combo. Interesting to see Keenan paired with the rookie, because that's going to dictate it, because I think Keenan will definitely be the leader in screen time and appearances at the end of the year. So I think Sammy K is riding with Trost, because that's going to determine if he's the winner or not.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so those are our draft standings. I also want to share just a couple tidbits about this episode that I think would be good for the By the Numbers show. So I was talking with our buddy Eric. I see him in the chat. We were talking earlier in the day today. And also Ellis, who works with us, he had also mentioned this stat as well to me, which was that this was the first time since season 8 of the show that we had a solo host in an episode. So just the host on his own on the cold open of the episode, just to clarify, cold open. So
and who was the host?
With Pete Davidson. that would be Chevy Chase. So Chevy Chase was live from Burbank, California, and there was like a TV there, and we have a crew member that sort of like pushes down the TV, so it's like a weird thing. But this was a very unique situation to open up the show where the host is direct to camera and by themselves out there. Typically in that situation, it would be a cast member. So I thought Pete was great in that. And so we have a few other notes. First host to say live from New York in a season premiere since last season. So also happened last season as well. First solo live from New York in a premiere since season 44. First time one person was in the cold open of a premiere since Daryl Hammond in season 29. So going back 20 years that we've had only one person, one cast member in a premiere by themselves. Okay. Yeah. I just want to make sure that. Yeah. So first host all the way since season 8, first cast member, first person since Daryl Hammond in season 29. So there you go.
Yeah. One thing mentioned the cold open, of course, the subject matter is very serious, but I was also looking at it from a stat perspective and thinking, interesting when they do a short cold open. So of course we're not going to have a very serious short cold open every week, but one thing that it does bring though is we got an extra sketch. So there was definitely, if things weren't the way they are, and SNL did not feel the need to address such a terrible and serious subject, probably one sketch would have got cut. So I was looking, I'm like, how many times did it happen last year? So only 3 episodes last year had 14 or more segments in that. That was the Michael B. Jordan, Keke Palmer, and Amy Schumer episodes had 14 or 15 segments in it. This one had 14. Average for a show was 13 segments if you add up 2 performances, update, monologue, cold open, and a number of sketches or pre-tapes. So it is something that I like to see. So of course, when we have a comedic cold open, when it's on the shorter side, we might be able to squeeze in a pre-tape or a sketch, which I'm always in favor of. So John, do you think that they should generally shorten the cold opens for that reason? Obviously not for this specific reason, but do you like to see an extra sketch at the end of the night? I feel like we had 2 10-to-1s last week.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. Look, it's all dependent on how high quality the cold open is. I think it's a really tough question to answer. It's just like, yeah, if you got something good, then go with it. I mean, I still think like the Bush Gore debates and the 88 debates, like which are like 10-minute cold opens or 10 minutes. Actually, the 88's not a cold open, but like some 10-minute sketches we've had in the history of the show have been really strong. I think that the Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Sarah Palin, Hillary Clinton sketch is like a long sketch that opens up the show, but it's so great. Like sometimes these things really, really work. I just think as a general concept, we should look to write 10-minute cold opens. But I think if you have the right place for it, go for it.
Totally agree. I think if the cold open's the best part of the show, it should be as long as it needs to be. If it's probably the 5th or 6th, then maybe it shouldn't be more than 5 minutes, in my opinion. But that does it for this week. Victoria, thank you for coming on. So great having you. Love to hear your insight and your diarrhea laughter. What do you got going on, and where will we see you other than next week at this exact spot?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited for all to come this season of SNL By The Numbers, and I'm truly honored that I was of consideration. That said, outside of here, if you are in Chicago, you can catch me at the Second City this Monday at 8 p.m. and on the ETC Theater, where some of SNL's finest have walked. I will be performing, and then I'll be performing every Monday after that through November 20th. And then starting January, you can find me performing at the IO Theater, also known for its SNL cast members to come out of there on Wednesdays. I'll be on House Team 4 Malarkey Comedy. And then if you want to know, if you're going to forget and you don't want to rewatch this to find out where I am, just follow me on Instagram and I'll post it there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week. John, What can the listeners get excited about from the SNN?
Well, if you want to see more screen time, you can see all of that data. We're going to end up posting it to social media tomorrow. So if you want to hear it first, you have to come to the podcast on Wednesday nights, and then we'll post it on social media the next day so you can analyze it and share it with your friends. So that is something exciting for our social platforms. You can find us Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and on X at the SNL Network. As for what's happening here on the podcast, so it's been a crazy premiere week. It's just been every day of content, and I hope you enjoy it as an SNL fan, because really we love producing it for you. you. So starting with the hot take show, Victoria was with me as well as TJ and Bill to be live right after the premiere. We had so much fun on that show. Our roundtable on Monday, we had some really, really fun discussions on Pete Davidson's legacy at the show and what we feel about him coming back and premieres in general. So I think it was a great conversation there. Last night, our Punky Johnson interview came out, so that's available now everywhere you get podcasts. If you want to hear Punky talk, she was just so real and just awesome to get to talk to. So such a privilege to get to chat with her for a little bit. By the numbers tonight, and then tomorrow night to wrap up the week, we have the continuation of our greatest cast member countdown of all time. So tomorrow night you can come right back here and join us, where we are going to reveal 30, 29, and 28 on the list of the greatest cast members of all time. So that's coming up. And if you're a patron, we have a bonus podcast that will be coming out on Thursdays exclusively for patrons, where we will dive into a sketch even deeper and do some, film analysis. Mike, you would love the show because it's basically like, picture yourself like in NFL films analysis, where we're going to go through, we're going to have the sketch up on screen, we're going to pause it, talk about the moments that we like. Was this written correctly? Was it well cast? What were they thinking here? And the patrons, if you're a patron, you get to vote on which sketch we talk about, and that will be released exclusively to you. So that is a fun new thing we're trying this season. And if you want to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/the SNL network.
Awesome. Has that already been decided? Was it voted on?
Yeah. So
do you want to tease
I'll
it?
let you guys know here. Yeah, sure. Week number 1, we're going to talk more about the PDD sketch from this week. That's what the patrons wanted us to talk about. So we're going to get into the original Princess of Comedy and talk through every single moment of that sketch and if it really worked.
Awesome. I can't wait to check that out. Well, for myself, Jon Schneider, and Victoria Franso, I'm Mike Murray. Thank you for checking us out. We'll be back next Wednesday to talk Bad Bunny double duty. We'll do those stats as well. So we'll see you next time, Wednesday, 8 o'clock. Thank you very much.